You've been killing me with Hitler's gun? Hello, my name is Will, and this is Exploding Helicopter, the podcast that likes to watch a python devour its prey. In the realm of science fiction films, time loops have served as a fascinating narrative device to explore themes about personal growth, redemption, fate versus free will, and even the meaning of life itself. Heavyweight stuff indeed. Fortunately, the film we're talking about largely ignores those type of brain-aching questions in favour of extravagant shoot-'em-up action, making it perfect fodder for intellectual Neanderthals like us at Exploding Helicopter. So on this show, we're looking at 2021's Boss Level. Given that we're discussing a film where characters wearily repeat the same depressing experience over and over again, who could be more fitting as my guest than Nick Rehack? Welcome to Groundhog Day, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Okay, yep. Hopefully this won't feel like you're just living the same tedious day over and over again.
I think we'll be okay this time, but we'll see what happens in another 5 minutes.
Okay, well, we're talking about time loop films today. So, how do you find movies that use that type of idea? And have you got any favorites?
I tend to enjoy the more action ones, like Edge of Tomorrow, the Tom Cruise film, Source Code with Jake Gyllenhaal. I think those kind of play with it a little bit and make it fun. Like Edge of Tomorrow obviously embraces like the full-on video game style. Source Code kind of makes it a detective thriller, but does it within specific parameters. And I think for the most part, it works and is enjoyable. There's other ones out there, but some of them are like, they're like love stories and it plays on that, or some are a little too depressing for me. So I tend to just stick with like, let's have fun and be upbeat.
Okay, well, you should be at home then with Boss Level then, because I feel it fits very much into the kind of time loop movie that you enjoy.
Oh, absolutely, and some of it even was a little too on the nose at times, but it was definitely of that like video game fun and ilk.
Well, actually, you raise a good point there, because we'll get into it in the film. But handily, there's a very strong video game influence on this film, and I know that you are a bit of a gamer yourself, so it will be interesting to get your take on how that aspect of the film worked for you. But before we get stuck into Boss Level, let's find out what Frank wants to drink.
Hey, Jake, can I get a large bottle of that Baijiu? You know what? Make it 2 large bottles.
How can you drink like that?
I used to complain that every day felt the same, and now every day is the same. I have died 144 times when every day ends like this. But it doesn't matter. Not when you've lost everything you've loved. Venter, man who's had me killed 150 times.
The power to rewrite history is mine.
Heads up. I know everything that's gonna happen.
I'm being tortured!
One thing that never changes?
What's up, pretty boy?
A bunch of assholes are killing me for reasons that remain a mystery.
I am Guan Yin, and Guan Yin has done this.
1, 2, 3.
It's for you.
Roy, can you hear me?
Can't explain it right now, but I'm gonna need your help.
Gemma? The only woman I've ever loved and who can stop this is still alive. I have to get killed.
Hi, Roy.
Over and over again. Until I save her. I need to learn how to fight with a sword.
I would only have a day.
I think we can get a lot done in a day.
Someone's been the busiest little beaver.
I'm stuck in the death loop because of you.
Exactly.
Bring them all on. Every last one of them. I can do this all day.
Boss Level follows the story of Roy Pulver, a former Special Forces operative who finds himself trapped in a time loop on the day of his death. Roy continually relives the same day where he is hunted relentlessly by a group of quirky and deadly assassins. Each loop ends when Roy is killed. As Roy progresses through the loops, he hones his survival skills and begins to uncover the reasons behind his predicament. The time loop is tied to a secret government project called the Osiris Spindle, developed by Roy's ex-wife, which is being manipulated by a colonel called Ventnor. With each reset, Roy grows closer to unraveling the conspiracy and understanding the personal stakes of his mission. In the cast, we have Frank Grillo, Mel Gibson, Naomi Watts, and Michelle Yeoh. The film was written and directed by Joe Carnahan, who's made films like The Grey, The A-Team, Cop Shop, and Narc. The film has an average user rating of 6.8 on IMDb and a user rating of exactly 3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So, with all of that out of the way, Nick, what did you make of Boss Level?
This was an interesting one for me because typically when I watch movies, especially for this podcast, I find myself at times being like, man, this sucks. I just can't wait to get through it. Or I'm having so much fun. I hope that this movie keeps lasting. This film does both for me. This film makes me angry at points. It frustrates me at points. But then there's other times where I found it enjoyable. And I'm watching this and going through this up and down and all around. And I'm trying to figure out, why do I feel that way about this film? What is it? And I think for me, the film is fun. I think the premise is great. But it's the actors. It's the cast. I feel like Joe Carnahan called in a lot of favors or asked a lot of his buddies and pals to come in and do this movie so they could do it a little bit cheaper or whatever. And it doesn't work because there's characters that don't have any chemistry that are working together. There's some character, I'm like, what are you doing? Like Will Sasso, I think he's fine, but he's doing like a voice the whole time. And it's like they could have gotten anybody to do just a generic tough guy voice. I feel like Mel Gibson's half-assing it. I've nothing against Frank Grillo, but I don't think he works in this particular film. Like Naomi Watts is the only one where I'm like, did he owe her, or did she, like, someone owed someone a big favor, or there's blackmail or something involved. And then like Michelle Yeoh's in there for a little bit, and it's like, what are we doing? What is this cast? Why is this cast? And like, just what the hell? Because again, this has the potential to be just phenomenal, one of the best out there. I'm sure it's a cult classic to some, but it's truly a really, really good premise. It's directed well, it's edited well. It's all the takes, they got to keep everything up. Special effects, that could use a lot of work. Overall, there's such a great opportunity here, and this cast, it doesn't. They can't get it together, and I don't know what it is.
Well, okay. Well, some interesting points there, and maybe I can sympathise a little bit with them because I watched this film when it came out, which came out 3 years ago now, and I didn't really like it at the time. Haven't seen it since. Rewatched it for this podcast, and actually I enjoyed it a lot more. And I was really kind of struggling to recall what it was that I didn't like back when I first saw this film, because I certainly don't, it's no classic or anything, but and I certainly agree it's got some flaws, but there's lots here that you can enjoy. So I want to sort of pick your brains a little bit, because maybe it'll help me remember kind of what the problems were that I had back with this film when I watched it. Now, you mentioned that you had some frustrations with this film. So what were those? I mean, you spoke a little bit about the cast. Is that the kind of principal frustration you had with this film, or were there other things that you found irritating as well?
I think it's a handful of it to do with the cast itself, but I think it's also partly the presentation, because at first when it happens and we're getting the narration or the voiceover, and it's like, oh man, it's going to be one of these, isn't it? And it keeps going and it gets better, but there's something about Frank Grillo. He's fine, he's fantastic, he's great. But his voiceover, I feel like he's just reading a piece of paper. There's no like real energy, or doesn't feel like he's actually talking to us, kind of thing. There's just this lack of emotion there. It just feels like this real generic, like, yeah, and then I did this thing. Oh no, 12 o'clock, got a duck. Well, man, I've missed this truck 22 times before. It's pretty crazy. Like, it just felt to me very monotone and just not as engaging as I would hope it would be. And maybe that's because, when you get films like Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds is kind of going on and expounding and doing his thing. Yeah, there's a lot of voiceover work there, but it feels in the moment. It feels like it's actually happening with you as you're watching it. It doesn't feel like we did this whole thing. Okay, now read this voiceover to the scene, and there's no like if he was talking during voiceover, he would go, yeah, and then, oh man, this guy just bumped me. Ouch. Like, no, you would be like, oh, like, what the hell is that? What's that guy's problem? There's no energy to his voice. There's no pep to it. And I felt like it was like taking things away. And then, like, that really, really threw me. And then I'm watching, I'm like, why this guy? And in my head, I'm actually rewinding scenes because I've missed moments of dialogue because I'm too busy thinking, why did he cast this person? Why did he cast this person? In the beginning, there's a conversation with Mel Gibson's character and Naomi Watts' character. They're standing a very long distance apart, and he says to her, sit down so this doesn't look like an interrogation. And I'm like, all right, that's a weird line, but whatever. And she sits down on a couch that's facing the other direction. It's like, okay, sure, but not like come sit closer, come to... It just felt all very like robotic. None of it felt like there was human emotion in there until Naomi Watts was bringing some life into it, and her role and her parts felt very just... real. And I'm like, okay, I can get behind this, but everybody else, I'm like, are we reading cue cards off screen for the first time, or these first takes? Like, what are we doing? Where's the energy? Where's the emotion behind it? It just felt to me very stale.
Well, I do have to agree with you about the voiceover, and it's a very particular type of voiceover in this film, and I think this is definitely something that rubbed me up the wrong way on my first viewing of this film. It's one of those very self-aware, knowing voiceovers, and there is an awful lot of it as well. And there's a famous quote, I can't remember it verbatim, but it's something along the lines that basically the narration is like the last resort of the sloppy screenwriter. It's like if you're having to resort to narration, it's you're not telling your story sufficiently cinematically. And I definitely remember having an issue with the voiceover in this film. It bothered me much less on this particular viewing. I think maybe just because I was aware, I was braced for it, and maybe I just entered a bit more into the spirit and tone of this film, because it is a very postmodern film. It's very meta. The narrator is commenting on the action. You have characters within the film who are actually sort of referring to other films and other actors, and so it's engaging with the real world in that sort of postmodern ironic way. Some people really love that. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of that particular style, but I think overall, I kind of came away finding this is a very fun film. I mean, it's actually, I think there's quite a lot of wit in here. There's some good one-liners, but there's also a lot of visual wit. There's some visual gags here born out of the time loop and the way in which Roy, or Frank Grillo's character, is learning about the world and the events that are going to be thrown at him and how he navigates them. So it exploits the time loop aspect of the film for its action sequence, obviously, but also uses it as an opportunity for humor as well. And I mean, do you think on other viewings you'll sort of get into the spirit of this film a bit more and perhaps have less of a problem with it?
You know what? I think you're exactly right. I think it's because I'm not expecting a voiceover narration like that, so it is a little polarizing at first. And like you said, now that you've braced yourself and you're aware of what's happening, because as the film went on, it did grow on me a little bit. But again, it still lacked for me like that pep and that energy. And I think it's because, and I hate to keep bringing up the comparison, but when you have, the Ryan Reynolds doing the Deadpool thing, very third-person omniscient and doing all kinds of jokes and being witty and stuff like that, like it just really works. So when someone else does it, unless they have a slight variation to it or they're doing it in a different way, it's not going to rank as high, and you're always going to hold it kind of to that standard. And it's not fair to the movie, and I understand that. But if you're coming in there to me with no emotion and just very cold, like it's hard to just kind of go along and have fun with it, because then once you kind of shake it and you get back into what's going on and you're enjoying it, you're like, okay, we're picking up, we're doing this and this. And there are some fun moments with it too. Like he refers to the one woman with the pistol as Pam. I think later on in the film, he's like, finally we meet, and she's like, Pam, and then he has to explain like, oh yeah, well, because the audience knows, but the characters don't know. And I think that's kind of fun too, because if you don't have the narration, who's he going to be talking to? He'd have to have a little companion or a little buddy with him the whole time and saying things out loud as exposition so we understand what's happening. But that wouldn't make for a great film. And if anything, the film would be that much longer, because then the other half of the film is he's trying to have his little companion stay alive so he can continue to explain things to that person so the audience knows what's going on. So,
yeah, I mean, as you say, given he doesn't have that sort of buddy to banter back and forth with and provide that level of exposition, yeah, I think definitely that the narration is needed in order to help fill the viewer in. But one thing I wanted to have a chat with you about was, because we've seen many films about people being trapped in time loops, and we've seen films where people are trapped in a computer game, but Boss Level blends these two elements together, and that makes sense in one way, because the nature of time loop movies, where you've got to solve a problem to stop the time loop resetting, I mean, that's analogous to computer games where you're trying to complete a level or something. But whilst you can make that association, and it's an interesting one to make, I don't know, I've watched this film a few times now. I don't actually think it's that helpful in terms of this film, because it just felt to me like a muddling of concepts. And I was wondering at times, are we watching Tron or are we watching Groundhog Day? Was this a problem for you, Nick?
The more I think about it, I'm not sure. And I say that because when I saw Joe Carnahan's name in the credits, I was like, oh, cool, Joe Carnahan. I love Smokin' Aces. Smokin' Aces is probably my favorite film that he's done, and it's one of just my favorites overall. Yeah, it's not in the top 50 of my favorite films, but it's up there, and I really, really love that movie. Smokin' Aces does a really good job of balancing drama and comedy and making the two work together. It's not too heavy-handed in one, it's not too heavy-handed in the other, and it's able to go back and forth between the two effortlessly and without feeling clunky. This film, it goes from that very much like this is an action film to, hey, we're having fun, this is comedy, to, okay, now there's drama and let's put a little emotion in there. Okay, but it's not really landing because we haven't balanced the other things properly, but now we're going back to the action and then to the comedy and then drama. So it kind of jumps around and does these things, but it doesn't do it in a well or balanced enough way. So when he's having these emotional moments with this kid and he's like, oh no, this is the meaning, so I'm just going to spend my time learning with this kid. For us, that should be like, oh man, that's really sweet, and we should feel that emotionally. And oftentimes it's like, okay, but now what? So is this what the movie is now? Oh no, we go back to it. Oh, he's depressed because of whatever, so now he's just going to lay there. Here comes the comedy again. It's too stark and it's too like choppy to get from one to the other. If there was somehow a way to blend it, it wouldn't be that bad. They also introduce characters at weird times, which I get because it helps with the plot. But there are some characters that we just kind of don't even need. So then it's like, okay, so is this for comedy or is this for action? What's the purpose of this character? And also, why are we still having this character? Because we've only seen them twice. The one I'm talking about particularly is like the hillbilly truck driver, where he shoots a spear through his chest and then decides to pull him down an alleyway while hooting and hollering and everything. We see that guy, what, maybe twice? We don't need him. The other people, okay, they're just random assassins. That's fine. But again, is this a comedy? Is this an action? Is this like it needs to find that balance and walk that line, and I don't think it does.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if you don't think about those melding of concepts, then you can relax and you can enjoy this film, and it's not a problem. But if you start actually sort of interrogating it, then it just really doesn't stack up, because it's within the concepts of the film, it's like, okay, why are we seeing these graphics on the screen? Like, these computer style graphics. This man is not inside a computer game. If that was the concept of the film, like, I get it, it makes sense. But other than making a mildly interesting comparison between time loops and computer games, I didn't really feel that it was really adding a lot of value for me. But don't think about things. That's the governing philosophy for watching this film, and maybe one that we should all apply to our lives. I don't know.
Well, I think conceptually, as a video game, it does kind of work, because you have these, not newer games, but everybody's used to, like, Mario, and you have to learn the pattern of you jump over this Goomba, you hit this turtle, oh, there's a hidden mushroom over here, something like that. games nowadays, you have stuff like, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, even God of War. They have these elements where you can't just go in and fight someone. You have to understand the boss you're playing. You have to learn their patterns and understand, and then you can do your speed runs, right? And some of these games, like Elden Ring, for example, relentless. They don't tell you what's going on. They beat the ever-living hell out of you, and you just have to deal with it. And when you finally get that success, that's the victory. Not that you've beaten the boss, but that you have conquered something. You've learned this character. You've figured out what they're good at and what they're not good at. You've exploited it, and you've ended them. I have friends that have played games like that, and I'm like, what'd you do last night? Oh, I played this boss for 5 hours straight. Did you beat him? No, but I think I'm close. Doesn't sound like fun to me. That sounds terrible. So as a video game like that concept, this very much works because he's doing the same thing over and over, and he knows to a T what to do until he gets to certain parts, and then he now has to learn. He has to get that new information. So as a concept, yes, it works. But like you say, when you start adding this, like the screen pop-ups and the little graphics and things, like, okay, so is that for us? Is that for him? Like, it starts to get a little clunky and uneven.
Fair enough. Okay, I think it's time to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about the exploding helicopter action.
New York City.
Got any money?
Where crime rules.
So let me see the product, man. Let me see the money.
Where the streets are the battleground. Where everyone is the enemy. Two cops go undercover.
Brother, spare a cigarette?
But the further they get inside, the harder it is to get out alive. New York Cop.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding helicopter action. This occurs at the start of each of Frank Grillo's time loops. After fending off an assassin in his flat, our superbly coiffured hero has to escape the attentions of a helicopter firing a minigun. He throws a knife at the goon that's behind the machine gun, killing him. With no one now aiming the minigun, it continues firing and swings round, killing the pilot. With no one now managing the controls, the helicopter crashes into Roy's apartment and explodes. So Nick, what did you make of the exploding helicopter we get to see here?
It was disappointing. I'm not going to lie. And seeing everything else in the film and how they do a lot of hiding when it comes to explosions and a lot of like cheats to kind of dial back the effects work and how many takes they have to do for it, it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit because we're in a film that you've got car chases, you've got sword fights, you've got gun battles, you got all this stuff going on, and you're going to skimp out on an exploding helicopter? Like, how dare you? How dare you do that? It's the beginning of the loop every single time this thing shows up, and you just... It hurts. It's even weirder to see that the goon that's firing the machine gun is Rob Gronkowski, who is a NFL tight end legend at this point. So many Super Bowl rings with the Patriots and the Buccaneers to an extent. So seeing him is like really off-putting. But as a Ravens fan, it's like, oh yeah, he's going to blow up and die in a fiery helicopter crash. This is going to be great. Not like in real life, obviously, but, you know, just to see him get a comeuppance for once. But
all
then
this
when you don't
passed me
see
by because I got no interest in gridiron.
Well, for the American audiences. But, you know what I mean? Here comes this helicopter into the building, and you're like, this is going to be amazing. And then we just get a little puff of explosion as he's jumping out of a window. Like, no, thank you. Give me something more. The rotors are hitting bricks. Okay, you're building it up. Give me something great. And then it just kind of falls flat. And it hurts. It hurts my feelings.
Okay. Well, I was a little bit warmer on it than yourself. I mean, I like these... I probably should come up with a name for it, but I like these sort of sequences where it's like one domino falls, then the next one falls, and the next one, and you end up with this sort of chain reaction. So I enjoyed the fact that, you know, Grillo throws this knife, lands smack in the middle of this guy's forehead, that kills him. That then results in the minigun swinging round, which kills the pilot, which then results in the helicopter then crashing into the building. I love those sort of chain reaction sort of sequences that end up with a helicopter exploding. I would agree with you that the actual explosion. I mean, we do get to see a shot of the helicopter kind of coming into the flat. Would have preferred to have seen that a bit more. And then we get a rather disappointing cut to a shot outside the building and that rather disappointing explosion. But I probably enjoyed it a little bit more than you. But with this particular one, though, we actually have some weighty issues to discuss with this particular exploding helicopter. And firstly, we actually need to establish how many exploding helicopters there actually are in this film, because this film features a time loop. So we see an abbreviated version of this particular scene with the exploding helicopter play out a further 6, possibly 7 times. Now, sort of an important point to note is that we don't see the helicopters or the helicopter in those subsequent versions. We just see a repeat of the explosion it caused in the first time loop. So my first question to you, Nick, is how many exploding helicopters should we consider this film to contain?
I consider it as 1. And I do that because he's not living a different day. He's living the same day over and over. So it's just one helicopter over and over. It's not like there's a helicopter and then here comes another one. It's just one that's over and over. And even when he gets to a part where he's unsure, because he gets past a certain point in the day where he's like, oh, I'm living now and I can do whatever, it's still just one helicopter that's exploding over and over. There's not like a second one that's around hunting him. There's not a different maker model that's coming around or one he finds later on. It's just one. So for that, I feel it's just one exploding helicopter that we get throughout the film. Does it explode in different ways? Yeah. It'd be no different than videoing something but having 7 different cameras on it, and then you show it from 7 different angles. It's still one explosion. You're just looking at it through different lenses.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a moment. So,
okay.
So I understand the point that you're making here, that it is, or that your argument here is that it is just one helicopter exploding. But Frank Grillo is, he remembers all of these loops. These loops are a cumulative experience for him. So you could say there's an equally valid argument that actually it's 7 helicopters that explode in this film, because that is how he is experiencing his life trapped within this Osiris spindle.
I would see your point, but I would also make the adjustment of we only come in at time number 140 or 138 or whatever like that. So if any of them ever explode before that, we weren't there. We didn't see it. So in my mind, they don't happen. Anything that have happened since we've come in, I'd be willing to say that it could count as an exploding helicopter, only because it's not like he's doing it the exact same way every time, because we also don't know that if he's doing it the exact same way every time. So if he's doing one where he knifes him in the head, and we have our Rube Goldberg machine of how a helicopter explodes, that could be one. You know what I mean? And if there's 20, or if he flashes back to time where maybe he knifes the helicopter pilot in the head, and he goes down, still causing an exploding fireball to come through the apartment where he has to jump, I would consider that a second one. But if he's doing it the exact same way every time, I personally would just consider it as one, no matter how many times he's done it before or since we join him in on where his story is. I feel like to an extent that's a fair compromise, but I'm also I want to hear more of your feelings on it, though.
Well, I'm not sure that I really have much more to add. I feel like we need to consult somebody who is into like quantum physics and who is more knowledgeable about, I guess, concepts of alternate timelines and so forth, because I feel that's the sort of expertise that we need to really consult if we're going to get a definitive answer here. I mean, I guess
this is a tough one. It's not like Wings of the Apache where we can kind of nail down and figure out, okay, this is the rules. It's not like the Dragon Wars film that we watched. Was it called Dragon Wars?
It was, yeah.
Okay, good, nailed it. Dragon Wars. We're even finding ones that we didn't even realize were happening. This one, like you said, we might need to get to that next level of quantum physics and understanding, thermodynamics and subatomical what have yous. But it's a tough one because we're in a way we're both valid because we're both approaching it from different exploding helicopter experiences and just life experiences in general. And it's a tough one. It's a tough one for sure.
Okay, I think we should wrap things up now before our brains, fizzle, splutter, and shut down for the day. Nick, before I reset the loop, do you want to take a moment to plug anything else you've got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. If you head over to rabbitholepodcasts.com, I'm on 2 programs over on that website. Play MST for me, myself and Jason Soto are watching every single episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000 ever made. It's been a whole lot of fun. Keep tuning in. Lyrical Innuendo is a program that Bubba Wheat and myself are a part of. We go through different songs throughout the history of rock music, pop music, etc. music, and we determine if they're about sex, drugs, or just good old-fashioned rock and roll. You can find them at rabbitholepodcasts.com or anywhere you get your podcasts, so on and so forth.
As always, don't forget to check out the Exploding Helicopter website at explodinghelicopter.com for more information and reviews of films where helicopters explode. If you can help us spread the word about what we do, I'd be very grateful. So if you could rate, review, or retweet the stuff that we do, I would be. It'll really help us out. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. The podcast is now on YouTube, so if you want to listen there, then knock yourself out. We'll be back soon. But until then, what should people do, Nick?
Keep watching those skies for those exploding helicopters. For I am Nick Rehack, and Nick Rehack has done this.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
I am Guan Yin, and Guan Yin has done this.